Well, those bridge changeovers are brutal. It's a coal roller. Gosh, we're all really impressed, I can tell you. Today, I'd like to talk about what's going on with GM and the Ultium platform rollout. I have concerns because of all of the talking they've been doing and how little delivering they've been doing. For the past 2 years, they've been talking about their rollout, and they've been very open about their new models and what's coming and when it's coming. Lots of advertisements. Basically every vehicle that they've announced has been announced, been shown in its final form a year before production started, and then eventually deliveries would start, or should have started, or will start. Here we are in February of 2023, and we've been hearing about all these vehicles. We already know about, of course, the Hummer, which has been delivered to customers. Their big honking thing with a 200 kilowatt hour battery pack, and every bell and whistle you could imagine, both from a performance perspective and a feature perspective. And that was a pretty bold statement to come out with first, I must admit. And the software is complex, and by all accounts it appears to function. So that's good news. But it was in such limited quantities. The Hummer EV it seems to be essentially hand built. It's built on a very short line, and I don't know how many they've built. Maybe 1,000 or so, and they seem to have delivered most of them. And they're in customers' hands, and customers are doing reviews of them. EV reviewers have had chances to drive them outside of the purview of GM and done charging tests and range tests and all those kind of things, which is very good because it means the platform works. It's real. It's not a phantom. But that's kind of like as a technology demonstrator in a way, because again, they were hand built and with the biggest of everything. And but now it's time for them to make cars for people who actually buy cars, that people actually buy, and that aren't just for celebrities and people getting their yayas out or whatever. And the only other vehicle that is purportedly for sale is the Lyric. And again, by all accounts, it seems like a really well-built, well-featured vehicle that lives up to its branding and its history, and that's great. But it's been supposedly on sale for a year or more, and they only announced they've announced recently that they had only sold 121 of them in 2022. And that was because they wanted to have a slow rollout to get feedback and to fix any issues before a broader rollout. And that makes sense. That being cautious is great, but I'm worried. And why does this have me worried? Well, it's kind of mostly around the battery pack. I'm concerned that they have run into issues scaling battery pack production and the reliability of it, or something like that. Because the Hummer EV, of course, they could hand build the modules and stack them in that big ass stack and make sure everything worked. And the Lyrics pack is apparently one half of the Hummer's pack, so it's just one layer instead of two. So that thing should get monster range, that Lyric. But heretofore, so far, I scoured the internet for articles and videos about charging experience, range experience of the Lyric, and there is nothing. And that is strange a year after a car has been released, even though they only sold 121 of them. You'd think somebody would have been allowed to make a range test and a charging test. And all of their happy talk for 2023 is that there are 3 Chevrolet models coming out in volume this year. We're already 2 months into this year, so we're talking within the next 6 months these things are supposed to be flooding the market, or at least showing up at dealerships. The Chevy Silverado truck, the Blazer EV, and the Equinox EV. And so that covers a pretty wide gamut of customer purchase interest, right? Trucks, of course, being the most popular segment. Blazer EV being a mid-size SUV, which is the other most popular segment. And then the Equinox filling out the quote-unquote low end of the market, currently occupied solely by the Bolt. But how do they go from selling 121 passenger cars in 2022 to selling 150,000 passenger EVs in 2023? At the rate they're rolling out the Lyric, I don't see how it's going to be anything but a trickle. But all of their talk is about wide availability. And I'm worried that they're not going to be able to do it. But why am I worried? Well, just the lack of information about the reliability and charging speeds and range of the Lyric, largely. And we hear lots of things about the Hummers having problems. And that's not surprising. But if there's only hundreds of them on the road and tens of them are failing, that's obviously a far too high of a failure rate. So there's that, and then the lack of information about what's failing. And the reason I'm worried about the battery pack is almost exclusively around one feature that they touted early on when talking about the Ultium platform. And that was that the modules communicate with the battery management system wirelessly. And that the big advantage of that would be they could just assemble modules into packs without having to make complex wiring looms or whatever to hook them all up, so that it makes it more flexible. And yeah, I'm sure it does, but wireless? So we're talking about the data from the battery modules to the battery management system, and what exactly are we talking about when we say that? The battery module is comprised, in the Ultium platform anyway, currently, of blade style or pouch style batteries, 12 or so of them, all wired in parallel and put in a container with a plus and a minus connection like a battery, and a data connection. That would be how a module normally functions. And then the modules are stuck into packs, maybe 12 modules in a pack, 24 modules in a pack, 48, however many you need to get to the kilowatt hours you wanted for that vehicle. And their idea was, if the modules communicate wirelessly to the BMS, they don't have to make separate wiring looms for every vehicle they make. But is that really that big a deal that wireless is worth all of the inherent risk in it failing or not working or working slowly? To me, it doesn't. Run a wire, man. Work always. But instead, apparently these modules have wireless communication things in them, some kind of Bluetooth-ish, communication protocol, and they identify themselves to the BMS and they send the information. And the information is things like the voltage of each pouch cell and the temperature of each pouch cell. And those things are really important for the BMS to know. And if one fails to communicate, the whole pack is rendered probably useless, because you can't charge or discharge an unbalanced pack. That would be dangerous, because if you were to let an individual module's, even an individual pouch, go below a certain voltage, that's either damages it or could actually cause the failure. And it's important that all the pouches be operating at the same voltage and be under their temperature threshold and over their minimum temperature threshold. There's a lot of things going on that have to go on for the battery pack to work. And if you add the complexity of communication problems to that mix, I don't see where that's a plus. And I guess that's what I'm primarily worried about. But that's complete conjecture. I don't have any information about how these things are performing in the real world, other than just people talking about what happens with their Ultium-based vehicles. And as we've discussed, the only ones out there are the Hummer EVs in very small quantities, and the Lyrics that they have sold but apparently aren't letting the owners talk about. So where does that leave us? Well, I'm just sitting here kind of like on the edge of my seat, scouring the internet for clues to how the Ultium vehicles are performing out in the wild. And I'm in this holding pattern just waiting for this, and I'm nervous. And it could be completely unwarranted. I certainly am impressed that GM is taking it slow, but they're still talking this really big game about 2023, these new models coming out in quantity, and in 2024, 2 new Cadillac models coming out again in quantity, and talk, but all they've delivered is a handful of Hummers and Lyrics. And the mismatch between what they're saying is going to happen and what has happened so far has me nervous. So what do we think? Am I concerned needlessly? Am I under-concerned? Is anybody else thinking that there might be issues? It's going to be an interesting year when it comes to GM's product rollout. That much, I think, is pretty much guaranteed. I do wish them all the luck in the world. I want their platform to work. I really do. And if I could get an electric Camaro, GM, please, thank you. That would be super sweet. Okay, thanks for listening. If you have been, sorry about the rambling. It's what I do. Hope you come back for another one soon.